If you think about this net zero by 2050 goal like a home renovation, it's not just a new coat of paint. No way. This is like replacing your roof, your furnace, and all the power lines in your neighborhood all at the same time. The price tag looks absolutely huge, but the potential savings, they're huge too. So let's get into it.
And that really is the big question hanging over this whole thing, isn't it? We hear about the goals, we hear about all the cool new tech, but what about the bill? Can we actually afford this massive global-scale project?
All right, brace yourself for some serious sticker shock. A major analysis from McKinsey estimates that getting to net zero could require something like $275 trillion in spending by 2050. I mean, that's just a staggering figure. It's almost hard to even wrap your head around.
But a headline number like that never tells the whole story. So that's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to follow the money, we're going to break down what's really behind that price tag, where the investment is going, and of course, who ultimately pays for it all.
Okay, first things first, let's decode that massive number and put it into some real context, because the real cost, well, it isn't quite what it seems at first glance.
Now this is really interesting, because it reveals a crucial detail. That $275 trillion figure, it's not all new money, not even close. See, even if we did nothing, the business-as-usual scenario, we'd still spend around $250 trillion just to maintain and run the energy system we already have. So the actual extra cost of the transition is way smaller. We're talking less than $1 trillion a year.
And this is a fantastic way to think about the economic logic here. The whole transition is about shifting our spending. We're moving away from high operational costs, like constantly paying for fuel, and toward a higher upfront capital investment. It's literally like buying a house instead of renting. Sure, you have that big upfront cost, the mortgage, but you're building an asset, and your monthly costs are stable, instead of being at the mercy of a landlord's random rent hikes. We're paying more upfront for the infrastructure to dramatically lower our fuel bills down the road.
So if we're spending all this money upfront, where is it actually going? Let's keep following that investment trail.
You can really break it down into 3 simple layers. First, we're investing in clean supply. That means building out massive amounts of solar, wind, and other clean energy. Second, you need bigger pipes to move all that clean electricity around. So that means a huge expansion and upgrade of our power grids and energy storage. And third, you have the end-use swaps. This is where you and I and businesses switch to technologies that actually run on that clean electricity, like electric vehicles and heat pumps.
And here's some real-world examples to make it tangible. Just the U.S. power grid alone might need almost 60% more transmission capacity by 2035. In transportation, global EV sales are on track to hit 22 million next year. In our homes, a single heat pump can replace both a furnace and an air conditioner. And then there's heavy industry, where the investment is going into electrifying processes or using new fuels like clean hydrogen.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the cost of the transition. But what about the cost of not transitioning? This is the hidden part of the equation, the piece that we often just ignore.
Get ready for another shocking number. According to the International Monetary Fund, our current system is being propped up by $7 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies every single year. Yeah, about $1.3 trillion of that is what they call explicit subsidies, like direct government money. But the rest, that's implicit subsidies. It's the unpriced costs of air pollution and climate damage that we all end up paying for through things like public health crises and disaster recovery.
So this is the crucial point, right? The idea that our current system is somehow cheap or free is just a myth. It's not. We are already paying trillions year after year to support it. Those costs are just a lot harder to see than the upfront price tag on a new wind turbine.
Which brings us to probably the most practical question of all. If this transition is happening, who actually foots the bill? Well, the short answer is we all do, but we pay in very different ways.
This slide breaks it right down. As taxpayers, we're funding things like tax credits and grants that encourage private companies to build clean energy projects. As ratepayers, and that's pretty much anyone with a utility bill, we pay for the big grid upgrades. As consumers, we're the ones facing the upfront costs of buying things like an EV or a new heat pump, even though incentives do help with that. And finally, there's a real cost for workers in communities and regions that depend on fossil fuels, and that has to be met with funding for job retraining and building new local economies. Here's another great way to think about it, especially when it comes to those potential rate increases. Building a modern, clean grid is like a massive highway expansion project.
Yeah, your tolls, or in this case your utility rates, might go up for a little while to pay for the construction. But once it's built, traffic flows better, and the long-term economic costs from all that congestion are dramatically reduced.
Okay, so after looking at all these pieces, what's the bottom line here? Does this massive global renovation project actually save us money in the long run?
The whole story really comes down to this classic trade-off. We're facing front-loaded costs. That's mainly the big upfront capital investments. In business, they call this CapEx. It's the one-time spending on physical stuff like turbines and transmission lines. And yeah, it can mean some near-term pressure on our utility bills, but that's weighed against massive backloaded benefits. These come from lower operational costs, or OPEX. That means lower and more stable energy bills because fuel from the sun and wind is free, less exposure to crazy swings in global fuel prices, and of course the enormous avoided costs of climate damage and public health problems.
And look, this isn't just theoretical. Independent studies have modeled this out. One found that getting the U.S. grid to 90% clean energy by 2035 could actually lead to wholesale power costs that are 13% lower than if we just kept doing what we're doing now. The savings are real, but it all depends on us actually building the infrastructure we need on time. So we end up right back where we started, but I think with a much clearer picture. Yes, the net zero transition has a real tangible cost, with big investments needed right now up front. But the evidence suggests we are already paying a massive ongoing price to maintain our current system. And that leaves us with the ultimate question: which cost is truly the one we can't afford?